The Halberts had worked the same patch of Missouri farmland for 5 generations. 20 acres of stubborn earth, a red barn with a rusted roof, and a crooked old farmhouse that leaned like a tired man after supper. It wasn't much, but it was theirs, and that mattered more than most things. Ellie loved it best in the mornings, when the dew was thick on the grass and the animals were loud with hunger. She was only 8, but she already had chores: gathering eggs, scattering feed, filling troughs. She'd named half the chickens herself. Her favorite was Petunia, a speckled hen who liked to sit in Ellie's lap and peck gently at her shirt buttons. Grandpa Earl said animals could feel your heart, same as people. He told her that while sitting on the porch swing, whittling a stick into nothing. "You be kind to 'em," he said, "and they'll be kind to you. That's how it works." He never had much use for talking about feelings, but his voice went softer when he spoke about the land. The old stone well sat at the back of the property, tucked behind a windbreak of cedar. Earl's father had dug it by hand nearly a century ago, shovelful by shovelful until the earth gave up its water. Never run dry and never run dirty, clean as a whistle. Grandpa liked to say, though he didn't drink from it anymore. Not since the city piped water in. The water company convinced them to hook their house up to the city water because they said that shallow wells are more likely to have lead. Now it was for the animals and crops. Ellie thought the well was beautiful in an odd way. Its round mouth was capped with a concrete slab, the stones below moss dark and cool. But Grandpa always told her to stay away from it. "Deep water's got a mean streak," he'd say, "and it don't give back what it takes." Dad didn't talk much. He was too busy trying to keep the farm afloat. The summer had been dry and the corn came up thin. The soybeans were worse. He'd already started working afternoons at the feed store in town between spending mornings and evenings in the fields. "We'll make it through," he told Mom when he thought Ellie wasn't listening, but there was a tightness in his voice that made her stomach knot. Life on the farm was quiet, steady, and full of work. Until the morning Petunia didn't come out of the coop. Ellie found her lying stiff, eyes bulging, beak crusted with a dark, sticky fluid. 2 more hens lay nearby, their wings twisted at strange angles. She called for Dad, her voice high and shaking. He knelt beside the bodies, his jaw clenched. The next day, one of the goats began trembling and vomiting froth. By week's end, the cows refused to eat, their eyes clouded and wild. The smell of sickness seemed to hang over the barn. Some sort of bacterial disease, Grandpa swore, but no one could figure out where it was coming from. The grain should be fine. Each animal ate a different type. The well? It had run clean for 100 years. One evening, Ellie wandered to the well just before dusk. She'd been told 100 times not to mess with it, but as she played nearby, she heard something beneath the surface. Not dripping, not splashing. Frantic, thrashing. Her first thought was that one of her chickens had fallen in, though she couldn't imagine how. She hesitated, then pushed the slab just far enough to peek. What she saw made her chest seize. She dropped the slab with a bang and ran full tilt for the house, not stopping until she slammed into her father's legs. Minutes later, the whole family stood at the edge of the well. Dad shone his flashlight down, but all he saw was the slick inner wall and black water below. The smell rising from it made Ellie gag. Not the earthy mineral smell she knew, but the sweet rot of meat gone bad. Dad turned on the pump. Water spewed from the hose in a cloudy gush, carrying the same stench. He swore under his breath, "We're not letting the animals near this until we get it cleaned out." "Little Ellie says she saw something down there," he told Grandpa later. "Probably a raccoon or possum drowned in it. Whatever it is, we've got to get it out." That night, when the house was quiet, Dad and Grandpa went back to the well. Dad leaned over, shining the light again, and froze. Something was looking back. Its eyes were pale, almost translucent, just above the waterline. Long fingers clung to the inner wall, twitching at the light like slugs recoiling from salt. Then, without a sound, it slid under the surface, leaving only a ripple. The sheriff promised to send someone by in a few days. But the Halberts didn't have a few days. The next morning, the last cow lay dead. The goats had broken through the fence and were found near the barn, their fur matted with bile and blood. They hadn't just died, they'd been attacked. Grandpa spat in the dirt. It's not just an animal, he said. It's feeding. Something that big that could take on a goat. It got into that sealed well and is getting out somehow. It knows something we don't. Might be a danger to us. That night, they made a plan. A baseball bat, rope, and a steel cage built from cattle panels. Dad was the one to go down, tied off to the tractor, and lowered like a worm on a hook. They didn't want to shoot the thing and fish it out because it would bleed in the water, making the problem worse. The plan was to hit it with a baseball bat and knock it unconscious. Dad had been the #1 slugger in high school, and if anything could knock the thing out cold, it was him. The tractor roared to life, and the noise woke Ellie. She slipped outside, heart thudding, and found them at the well. She shouldn't have been there, but they needed someone to hold the flashlight. Her hands trembled so badly the beam shook like a strobe. The well widened into a natural cavern at the bottom, walls slick with black moss. Floating in the pool was the thing, long-limbed, skin like dead fish, mouth opening the wrong way. It lunged. Dad screamed and the rope snapped taut. Grandpa gunned the tractor, hauling him up. A thud and splash, then the rope bounced and went still. Ellie jumped back, falling on her bottom. The flashlight fell out of her hand and broke on the hard ground, plunging them into darkness. Grandpa continued to pull the rope back with the tractor. After what felt like an eternity, a hand grasped the rim of the well. It was human. Dad emerged from the darkness, holding on to a limp thing with his other hand. He threw it into the cage and chained it closed. The thing slowly gained consciousness again and stood in the cage. It was big, almost as tall as Dad. It stood on its hind legs and stared at us. It let out an angry screech, then bang. Grandpa's .45 roared, and the thing fell limp in a pile. They buried the cage deep in the woods, poured lime over it, and said a prayer. The animals stopped dying. The water cleared, though they never drank from the well again. They sealed the well so nothing would ever be able to get in or out. Dad's crops were too far gone to save, and he worked the feed store full-time that year to keep them afloat. But the farm survived. Years later, little Ellie became Ellie, and she sometimes thought she could still hear that screech, muffled and far below, from under the capped well. Time passed. Grandpa Earl died one winter, and Dad followed a few years later, worn down by decades of work. The farm came to Ellie in a will written in her father's neat block letters. She moved back with her husband and their little boy, finding the old house smaller than she remembered, the barn leaning a bit more, the land still stubborn as ever. The well sat where it always had, behind the cedar windbreak, capped and sealed. Her son asked about it once while chasing the dog across the yard. "What's in there?" he asked. Ellie looked at the concrete slab, the moss-dark stones beneath, the place where her childhood ended. She heard herself answer in her grandfather's voice. "Deep water's got a mean streak," she said, "and it don't give back what it takes." That night, long after the house went quiet, Ellie stood by the well alone. She ran her hand over the cool, rough concrete and thought she heard it again. Faint, like a memory. A wet, echoing screech from somewhere far below.
What you just heard was a story, but for millions of people around the world, dirty water isn't fiction, it's real life. They may not have monsters in their wells, but what's in their water can be just as deadly. Unsafe water kills millions of people every year, and is scarier than any horror story you will ever read. But we can change it. Mr. Beast Team Water is raising money to give millions of people clean water by building wells, filtering water, and giving families the one thing that should never be a gamble, a safe drink. You can help. Click the link in the description. Be a part of Team Water, because the real monster is letting it go on.